It is 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. The armed attackers who struck in Turkey, killing at least 5 people at a government defence firm. Unhinged and unstable, the attack on Donald Trump from his presidential opponent, as his former chief of staff claims he said that Hitler did some good things.
It is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist.
Escaping from prison strapped to a lorry, the prosecution makes its case against a former soldier who had 3 days of freedom away from the cells. Applauded in court, the French rape victim who says she's standing up for all women who've suffered sexual violence. The man who to so many was simply the world's strongest man, Jeff Capes, has died at the age of 75. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. A terror attack in Turkey is being condemned tonight by NATO, the White House and Russia's President Putin. 2 attackers, a man and a woman, were filmed opening fire at a government-owned defence firm. Their allegiance hasn't yet been confirmed, but Turkey's interior minister said it was highly likely they were militants from the Kurdish group, the PKK. The attack took place this afternoon on the outskirts of the capital, Ankara. The target was the state-run aerospace and defence firm TUSAS. Our international correspondent, John Sparks, reports.
The gunmen arrived at the factory gates in the middle of the afternoon, detonating a bomb in the car park as the security team were carrying out a shift change. The assault on a state-owned Turkish defence company looked organised and well-planned, the perpetrators carrying automatic weapons with hefty bags. Here, a man and a woman advance carefully, cautiously, their weapons at the ready. The sound of gunshots pierced the air as employees at the factory and people in the local area took cover. Within minutes, Turkish troops arrived, and according to the authorities, the gunmen were neutralized. At least 5 people have been killed, with 22 or more injured, many seriously. The attack has been condemned around the world by the Americans and Turkey's friends in Russia, where the president, Recep Erdogan, is currently attending the BRICS summit.
This is an insidious terrorist act. I wish Allah rests the souls of our martyrs.
Turkish aerospace industries makes a range of civilian and military aircraft, and it also makes drones, displayed here in its promotional material. Their drones have been used effectively in a long-running conflict with Kurdish separatists, and it is the Kurdish PKK party that senior figures in Erdogan's government have already blamed for the attack.
In recent years, Turkey has been using drones to target the PKK in Turkey and also in Iraq and in Syria. I think the Turkish aerospace industries represent sort of a symbolic target. And in terrorism, symbolic targets carry a high value, symbolizing revenge. So I think that is why.
The timing is significant, with rumors of peace talks between the Turkish government and Kurdish separatists beginning to grow. But any room for dialogue has probably been eliminated. John Sparks, Sky News.
To the US, and Kamala Harris says it's troubling and dangerous that Donald Trump had reportedly said that Adolf Hitler did some good things. Those comments were aired by the former president's former chief of staff, John Kelly, who's been a long-time critic of his former boss. But the woman taking on Donald Trump for the White House said that the comments showed the character of her opponent.
This is a window into who Donald Trump really is. From the people who know him best, from the people who worked with him side by side in the Oval Office and in the Situation Room. And it is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, who in fact vowed to be a dictator on day one and vowed to use the military as his personal militia to carry out his personal and political vendettas.
Our US correspondent Mark Stone is in Washington, D.C. for us this evening. Hi to you, Mark. Look, there have been plenty of names bandied around in the campaign already, but the word fascist is something entirely different. It does seem to highlight a clear strategic decision from Kamala Harris and her campaign team.
Yeah, fascist, Hitler, an admirer of Hitler. It's worth saying that we have heard these claims against Donald Trump said before, but they have been in a different context. To start with, they haven't been right 2 weeks before the election itself, with the polls neck and neck. They've also been in books, unnamed sources or officials speaking to authors. This is different. This is John Kelly, a man at the very heart of the Trump orbit during the first presidency, chief of staff, no less, and a former decorated Marine general, talking in stark terms about the man he saw in the White House, the man he saw day in, day out. And he follows many other inner circle officials, Mike Pence, the vice president, Bill Barr, Mark Milley, Mark Esper, many others as well, all of whom have said the same thing. Now, these are not people who like Kamala Harris, but they are people who clearly believe that Donald Trump is unfit for office. Have a little listen to some of what John Kelly said.
The former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian, so he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure. If you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that. But if you know what Hitler was all about.
Now, clearly, John Kelly believes this, as do the other former inner circle officials. But the Harris campaign is jumping on this. Kamala Harris was outside her residence, her vice presidential residence, making this statement about it because they clearly believe that they must warn the American public, because they look at the polls, they see them still tight, and they believe the American public, a proportion of them, are simply dismissing these officials as disgruntled. They were fired. And that Donald Trump will surround himself with other guardrails in the future. The Harris campaign doesn't believe that. They believe the end game of their campaign is to warn the American public of what they see the threat in the Trump presidency.
Mark in Washington, D.C., thank you very much indeed. Well, the focus on the former chief of staff calling Donald Trump a fascist has taken some attention away, here at least, from the questions about Labour Party activists helping Kamala Harris's campaign. The Trump team had accused Labour of interfering in the American election. Our Prime Minister, though, said it's nothing unusual. And one former Labour staffer who worked on an Obama campaign told us it's often seen as a holiday. Our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen, has more.
A presidential election being watched closely all over the world and attracting political campaigners from overseas too, including the UK. Now the subject of a transatlantic row. The Labour Party's head of operations posted online last week that nearly 100 Labour Party staff, current and former, were heading to battleground states, and said she had another 10 spots available, promising, "We will sort your housing."
The Trump campaign's lawyers have quoted that post in this explosive letter to federal election authorities, calling on them to investigate the Labour Party for blatant foreign interference in the presidential campaign. They say paying for travel or accommodation or any use of party resources to organise the trip would breach US laws on foreign national donations. Labour deny any wrongdoing.
Angela Rayner, standing in at Prime Minister's questions today, insisted the volunteers had paid their own way.
Will the Deputy Prime Minister join me in applauding the brave Labour staff members who've travelled across the Atlantic to campaign against Donald Trump?
People in their own time often go and campaign, and that's what we've seen. It happens in all political parties. People go and campaign and they do what they want to do in their own time with their own money.
This former Labour staffer volunteered on the 2008 Obama campaign.
This is something that people do as a holiday, as hard as it can be to believe. The Trump campaign is engaging in a well-worn political stunt to try and grab some attention in an incredibly close election.
Senior members of Keir Starmer's team met campaigners for Harris at the Democratic Convention in Chicago, also noted by Trump's lawyers. Labour say they did not assist her campaign.
Oh, I'm non-controversial and shy compared to you.
UK politicians, well known and not, have often crossed the pond to campaign in the US. The Prime Minister, travelling to Samoa, played down the row, pointing out he had a 2-hour dinner with Donald Trump in New York last month and said the two have a good relationship. This former Conservative minister has recently been campaigning in the US too, but for the Democrats.
Is this a problem for Keir Starmer? Is this going to have ramifications?
Well, it does have an echo. Back in 1992, senior Conservative staffers went to advise the George H.W. Bush campaign, which caused quite a lot of irritation in the rival Clinton campaign, which of course won the election. And that did linger into the first term of the Clinton presidency.
Even if nothing comes of this investigation, the risk is if Trump wins, it could leave a sour taste to the special relationship. Tamara Cohen, Sky News, Westminster.
A reminder that we will, of course, have full rolling coverage of the US election on the 5th of November and through the night as the results come in. You can see the team there. It includes my colleagues Mark Austin and Yalda Hakim. They will be joined by Mark Stone, who we heard from a bit earlier on, and also Lewis Goodall. A former soldier who is on trial charged with escaping from prison told police that he never thought it was a crime, his prosecution said today. Daniel Khalif had allegedly got out of Wandsworth jail by strapping himself underneath a lorry. The court was shown CCTV pictures of him enjoying 3 days of freedom, including reading about the manhunt that was underway to find him. Our correspondent Alice Porter was in court.
For the first time, a jury has seen crucial CCTV of Daniel Khalif's movements when he allegedly absconded from Wandsworth Prison, leading to a nationwide manhunt. On the 6th of September last year, he was seen pulling a catering trolley inside the prison. He worked in the kitchens, and when a delivery truck came to drop off food, he used bed sheets to strap himself underneath the vehicle. Even though a prisoner was reported missing, the van was allowed to leave the prison. Daniel Khalif was first spotted on CCTV 6 miles away in Richmond later this same day. He was caught on camera walking past the White Cross pub before going into Mountain Warehouse. Inside the shop, he looks straight at the CCTV camera before stealing a cap and putting it in his bag. He continued to walk around the area and was seen along the river towards Richmond Bridge. The following day, he stayed in the West London area and bought a Samsung mobile in Hammersmith, before heading to the Marks & Spencer's in Kew, where he bought jogging bottoms and 2 shorts. He was also spotted on Sainsbury's CCTV, where he bought a £10 mobile top-up. On the 8th of September, 2 days after leaving prison, he made his way to Chiswick, where he was seen in a newsagent looking at a story about his alleged escape in a newspaper, which he then bought. On the morning of his arrest, on the 9th of September, Daniel Khalif bought a coffee from McDonald's and changed his clothes in the toilets. He was later arrested on the footpath of the Grand Union Canal in Northolt and returned to custody. The 23-year-old was initially in prison on remand over allegations he shared sensitive information with Iranian intelligence when he was a soldier. 2 days after Daniel Khalif left prison, Woolwich Crown Court heard that he allegedly contacted his Iranian handler on the very mobile he'd just bought. Using an encrypted app, he messaged with the words, "I wait." Despite the seriousness of the charges against him, which he denies, Daniel Khalif told police that it never crossed his mind that it was a crime to leave prison. He's now back behind bars, but questions remain over why he was able to escape jail in the first place. Alice Porter, Sky News.
The woman at the centre of a mass rape trial in France was greeted with applause today as she arrived at court to give evidence. Giselle Pellico said that despite her own trauma, she wanted to offer hope to other victims, to think if Giselle can do it, we can too. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins reports now from the court in Avignon.
Giselle Pellico, the woman at the centre of a mass rape trial, a symbol of strength across France. Arriving to applause. Today, the 72-year-old told the court how over almost 10 years her ex-husband drugged and raped her and recruited other men to allegedly do the same. Dominique made lots of meals because I was looking after the grandkids, but I never thought he could do this, she said. One night I finished the meal and went to the bathroom. He gave me an ice cream in bed. It was my favourite, raspberry mango sorbet. I thought, wow, I'm lucky to have a husband who looks after me like this. She spoke directly to that husband of 50 years who's admitted his crimes. He's on trial with 50 other men accused of assaulting her.
Some of the defendants have apologised, claiming they thought they were taking part in a couple's sex game. Today in court, Mrs. Pellico said there was no consent. They did this to an unconscious woman. Rape is rape, she said. They're apologising to themselves, not to me.
While many of the men deny the charges, the brutality of the case has brought people out onto the streets. Today, Giselle explained she waived her anonymity to give others strength. I want all victims of rape to say, well, if Madame Pellico can do it, we can do it. When someone's raped, they often feel ashamed. But it's not for us to be ashamed, but for those men, she declared. The attacks took place in the couple's home in the sleepy town of Mazan. Dominique Pellico's crimes were finally uncovered after he was caught trying to film up women's skirts in the local shopping centre. Until then, no one suspected him. The profile of a rapist can be normal, can be a friend or a family man, Giselle Pellico told the court. Giselle Pellico says she's a destroyed woman. But leaving court, proof she's so much more. She's a figure of hope for many in France, a survivor. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Avignon.
Now, we saw a little bit earlier on one of the world leaders at Vladimir Putin's so-called BRICS summit. Alongside Turkey's President Erdogan were the leaders of China, India and other emerging powers. Their host proclaimed what he called the start of a new world order at the meeting in the Russian city of Kazan. Our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett reports from there.
There were sweet treats on arrival for world leaders in Kazan. Recognition, perhaps, that some needed their visits here to be sugar-coated. Vladimir Putin doesn't seem to mind, though. He has what he wants. The company of more than 20 heads of state who have come to Russia for the BRICS summit of emerging economies. And the message from the Kremlin is loud and clear. The West's efforts to isolate Russia haven't worked. Its strongman leader is only getting stronger.
It shows something about the weakness of the sanctions regime. There was a lot of exaggerated sense as to how essentially the West could put a stranglehold on Russia. And many countries are frankly not willing to play those games. And it highlights the degree to which in this incredibly complex, multi-connected modern world, it's very hard to actually isolate any country.
Top of the agenda here is an alternative platform for international payments. It's an attempt to sanction-proof Russia's economy. And according to Vladimir Putin, it'll help fix the world's problems.
We have assumed responsibility for the future of the world, not in word, but in deed. We are exerting a truly positive influence on global stability and security.
Ukraine and the West would argue very differently, but there's no sign of the West here this week.
As the host of this summit, Vladimir Putin is trying to turn the BRICS group into a powerful rival to the West, both politically and economically. He sees that as the foundation of what he calls a new world order. The trouble is, not everyone here shares his anti-Western sentiment. Some members are trying to play both sides and are here to pursue their own interests.
India is one example, but they still weren't willing to criticize their host. Did you tell Vladimir Putin to end the war in Ukraine?
No, I'm sorry, I can't.
How can we...
Well, next time, please. Next time.
Was the war in Ukraine a topic you discussed?
Next time, please. Next time, please.
Is anyone criticising the war in Ukraine here?
Next time, please. Next time.
The heightened security hints at that bigger picture. Kazan airport was forced to briefly close ahead of the summit because of a drone threat. But all that's being glossed over by Russia's president, who's enjoying the global spotlight. Ivor Bennett, Sky News in Kazan.
A 6-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter after 3 people died at a care home in Swanage in Dorset. Police investigating say if carbon monoxide poisoning is to blame, then they're looking into whether gross negligence has been a factor. The identity of firearms officers will be kept secret during any prosecution they face and only revealed if they are then convicted. It is part of several measures outlined by the Home Secretary after Metropolitan Police marksman Martin Blake was cleared early this week of murder over the shooting of Chris Cabba. Yvette Cooper told MPs today that the current system for holding officers to account doesn't have the confidence of either the public or the police. Israel struck again at Beirut tonight, launching an airstrike on a broadcaster politically aligned with the militant group Hezbollah. Tonight, though, we are focusing on events further south in Lebanon. Speaking to Sky News, the Israeli Defense Forces again today criticised the United Nations peacekeeping operation in southern Lebanon. There are 50 UN bases there, and Israel has been accused of targeting 5 of them. But a lieutenant colonel we interviewed said they hadn't done their job and that Hezbollah positions were literally under the noses of United Nations troops. Our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, has visited the settlements of Mitzpehila and Kfar Rosh, close to Israel's border with Lebanon. Here's his report.
From this point, we can see and hear that Lebanon is under attack. We were taken by the Israeli army to within sight of the border.
Well, the smoke you can see rising there is just inside Lebanon. That border is 2 miles away from us. And when Israeli ground forces crossed it, what they discovered were huge stockpiles of weapons and ammunition. They claim that Hezbollah was planning a huge attack on the people who live around here.
Israel says the United Nations should shoulder some blame for this war. It claims UN peacekeepers ignored years of Hezbollah breaking a ceasefire agreement by stealthily militarizing the border.
Their mandate was to prevent any armed groups in the south of Lebanon besides the Lebanese armed forces. Clearly, they're not doing that because we're fighting Hezbollah forces in southern Lebanon. We found some Hezbollah positions literally under the noses of UN bases.
The UN admits it did know about weapons being brought in, but doesn't have the power to take direct action. And it told us the ceasefire resolution had been broken by both sides.
Neither of the parties were ever fully committed to Resolution 1701. And we saw this, unfortunately, from the beginning. We had violations all along. What we're seeing now is, unfortunately, a result of that and the lack of trust between the parties, frankly, that has led us to this position where we have an open conflict.
Half an hour away, and we are at the border itself, now deserted, but for the sound of shells and an air of tension.
Well, here's a good indication of how quickly things can change in this area. We were just about to leave this army base when we were told to get down and take cover. People now, the soldiers running around. We understand that there's an unidentified drone flying around here.
That danger passed because the drone was intercepted and shot down in a cloud of smoke. Inside Lebanon, Israel carried out airstrikes on the port of Tyre. It had previously warned people to leave. In Gaza, the north is still the focus. Jabalia was struck again. Hundreds have been killed here in recent weeks. Prisoners seized, blindfolded, and driven off. And what's left behind is bewilderment, shock, and fear. And as night fell, a huge explosion in Beirut. There is no end in sight to this war. Adam Parsons, Sky News, on the Israel-Lebanon border.
Next, when we talk about bullying in schools, the natural assumption is that children are the victims. But teachers have told Sky News that it's also rife between staff members, including one who described being left in tears every night by racist taunts from colleagues. Others say schools are using payouts and legal documents to silence them. Sky correspondent Amelia Harper has the story.
The worst bullying actually happens in the staff room between the teachers. It's not the children.
This is a place where children are kept safe. But those who care for them say they aren't protected at all.
I was crying every night to my mum on the phone.
Maya, whose identity we're protecting, has been a teacher for 12 years.
Some of the bullying I've experienced is racism. So I've been called the N-word quite loosely. Then I'd be sitting in amongst the teachers and they'd be saying comments like ding, 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 as if it was Indian jingle music and things like that. And then also that I'd have to bend over to get a promotion.
And Maya's story is not unique.
We've spoken to over 320 teachers who've all come forward alleging they've been bullied in their schools, some over multiple schools.
Maya was paid tens of thousands of pounds by the school after her experience, and part of the deal, the signing of a non-disclosure agreement. And NDAs are used frequently among the teachers we've spoken to. 119 people say they signed one, and we calculate this would cost over £1.7 million in payouts. Many who signed one went to their union for help.
The problem with having NDAs is it is covering up or not allowing anyone to explore whether it was appropriate for the individual and appropriate use of public money for them to be paid to exit a school. So in that sense, no, they're not appropriate.
On paper, the bullying has been dealt with, but mentally it's still there. Of the teachers spoken to in this investigation, over a third have had serious, credible thoughts or plans to harm themselves to escape their treatment in schools. And it's a familiar feeling for Tracy, again, not her real name. A teacher of 25 years, when she questioned her school's direction, she says she was targeted.
I was manipulated very, very cleverly with the threat of something that is called a support plan, which is not a support plan. It's a tool that is used quite commonly in schools to put somebody just ahead of being put through capability processes. And it's code for you don't fit, we want you out. I was suicidal.
Tracy also signed an NDA. The impact of these documents is clear.
I signed away all my legal rights to challenge at any given point in the future. It was devastating.
Responding to the findings of this investigation, Education Minister Catherine McKinnell says staff should feel confident to report concerns and the government expects school leaders to take appropriate action. She says their Education Staff Wellbeing Charter invites schools to commit to staff wellbeing. But for the teachers, the impact of the bullying has been profound, only now finding the courage to speak out after years working under the shadow of bullying. Amelia Harper, Sky News.
Finally, to millions of TV viewers in the 70s and 80s, he was simply the world's strongest man. Jeff Capes has died at the age of 75. But he was much more than that, though. He still holds the British record for the shot put of nearly 22 metres. That was set 44 years ago. British Athletics said it was saddened to hear of his passing. Look at that effort there, pulling a truck. Who doesn't remember that? That was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, I'm joined by The Times' chief political correspondent, Aubrey Allegretti, and The Telegraph's deputy comment editor, Annabelle Denham. Among the stories that we'll be discussing this, on the front page of Annabelle's paper, The Daily Telegraph, its headline, Starmer's top aides drawn into Trump row. We'll be right back.